Hello, everybody. And today I have something really, really exciting to show you. This is probably our most exciting product update ever. What you see before you is a dashboard. And in this dashboard, what do I have? I've got a hierarchy widget where I can expand and collapse a hierarchy. I've got a custom radio list picker. I've got a chart.js integration here. I've got a Gantt chart and some other custom components. How did I do this? With the magic of LWC, and particularly using a pilot that we've had since the spring release. And I'm going to show you all about how this works. So first off, let me just give you an overview of this platform. So what this is a dashboard extensions. You're able to build your own, extend the dashboard with Lightning Web Components. Basically build your own widget, build your own functionality. We have some examples, things like hierarchy, navigation, Gantt chart, inline editing, or just create your own. So it's really going to be exciting to see what people build with this. So a little bit about how this works. So talking about our dashboard runtime in general, right? We've got our widgets, and our widgets are always connected to a query, also known as a step. And they get data from that query and display it. And they can also kind of pass selections back down to the query. And then there's this global and embedded filters layer. And all of this then runs on top of these pages. And we've got tooltips and layouts of how do we present and where do we present this information. A little bit more deeper dive, right? You've got this kind of the widgets subscribe to their query. Those queries can kind of communicate to each other with faceting or with bindings, and then they all sit on top of these global and embedded filters that can be passed down to all of them together, or they can choose to opt out. And it can get even more complex, right? Because you have these bindings. So I can bind and I can directly make one widget get information from a different query that isn't even the one associated with it. You've got results going up, you've got selections coming down, I've got filters. So there's a lot of different ways, but there's also a good, clean separation of concerns here, so that one thing doesn't have to really understand how the whole system works. So what we're doing here is we're taking this LWC, giving you a new building block where you can build a component, this LWC, and then it can optionally attach to a query and get information from that query and pass selections back to that query. So the most common pattern here is just being able to create a custom visualization, right, or a custom widget to manipulate state. But really you could kind of do almost anything with this. But the key is that you don't have to reinvent the wheel. You don't have to reinvent data collection. You don't have to specify how it interacts with everything else in the dashboard. All of that can be defined within the dashboard framework. The author can just kind of do that with clicks, with tiny little binding statements. So you really don't have to worry about the whole thing and how it's used. You really don't even need to know where the data is coming from. You just assume that there will be data and leave it to, at design time, you can kind of configure out the shape of that data that there will be. So let's look a little bit deeper dive. If you look at this LWC, right, we've got those facets and those filters. That query, again, just like other widgets, it sends results to the LWC, so the LWC can get those results right from the query. It can also send back what is selected, what did the user touch, what did the user click on. And then, of course, we've got these attributes, right? We've got attributes where I can have things like, for visualization, a reference line, right? You can have that being a static value, where I specify the reference line will be at 1,000, or it could be a results binding to another query, and that could be a dynamic attribute that changes. And then on this left arrow here, what we have is the dashboard state. So this is something from the web SDK that we carried over. And this is the set and get state. So this is where you can actually just get the entire snapshot of the dashboard state. So that's every selection on every query, also every global filter, also the current page state, and basically get that whole thing as a JSON blob. And then you can also mutate it, change it, and set it so you can change everything all at once. This is kind of the bazooka functionality of I can change everything. whereas everything else is just kind of one point thing. So I always steer people to use this kind of right side and the center side. These are the kind of, that will have much more reusable content. But if these don't have a power, you need something more advanced, you always have that dashboard state that you can use. And also, just while I'm on this, don't forget about our Apex step. That's another way that you can make just a little block, a custom query. So if you don't have enough data sources, you don't have enough custom logic, you can always build an Apex step to have custom logic to get something like stock quotes or an external website or something like that. So it's just another tool in your bag that we've had around for a while. So what do you get when you combine this kind of clicks authoring with the ability to customize with LWC code and Lightning framework? Unlimited power, absolutely unlimited power in what you can do. So let's pivot over to the code and show you how to build some of this stuff. So first off, let's look at my dashboard here, and let's start really simple. I've got a couple different things, but let's look at this hello world. This hello world just says hello world Tableau, and I can kind of look at this hello world Tableau CRM, click on that, and you can look, it's got one attribute, title. I can change what this is. I can change this to Ed. It says hello Ed, that updates right away. There. So let's see, how would I build something like this? Let's go over to, I've got VS Code running right here, and this is my hello world example. So some simple things. So let's start with the HTML. Really simple. It's just a template, and I've got hello world, and then I insert that title attribute that we showed. Let's look at the JS, right? Really simple is that I've just exposed it. Hey, there's this API. This is a Lightning web components. It's just an LWC. And I've got this attribute title here that we can plug into different frameworks that'll be auto-populated. And then let's look at the meta. So in this XML, right? So this is, again, this is a standard LWC widget. There's just a couple things. So notice that we set is exposed true. Don't forget that. If you do forget that, you may not be able to find your component. So this makes it show up in the pickers. There's the master label and description carried over from the LWC framework. That's pretty standard. But what is new for our framework is we've got this target of analytics dashboard, right? So this is what tells you, hey, this Lightning Web Component is special. This can be used within a dashboard. And then we've got these target configs. So these are special configs for our target, for our analytics dashboard target. So in this case, we're saying has step is false. It's not going to be associated with a dashboard step or a dashboard query. And then we can specify the property. So in this case, we're going to give it one property. And we're going to say, hey, this property's name is title, it is of type string. The label is title, and then there's this description so people know what it is. It's the title of the component, and is it required? Yes, it's required. True. So users will have to populate that for our widget at design time. So now when you have all that, then it's going to look something like this, right? So that HTML we showed, template just renders and gets the value, which updates right away. And we can see that update right there. So really, really simple example. If you want to extend this, you can think about kind of going into having has step. You can always change this to true. Once you change that to true, then you can kind of go in here and say API results and start getting the results from the step. And then rendering them. So let me show you one example. So a simple way to extend that is this hello world. Again, hello world with step. And all this did is then it's going to say, hey, I'm going to take that results. I'm just going to format it as JSON. And then I'll just write that JSON to the page. So you'll see this one. And let me preview. Because what's cool is then that this facets, when we facet, you can see that these results are changing. And this re-renders based on any time those results change. So really easy to kind of use these attributes. You can use that results just like you used the title over in this one. So really simple stuff that you can do with this hello world, but let's kick it up a notch. And let's look at some of the more advanced stuff. Let's jump over to this list widget and see how you would build something like this. So in order to do that, I'm going to go switch over to a different workspace, my LWC pilot. And this workspace, this is a project that we are posting. We're going to give the source to everybody so you can kind of download this. You can play with these and change these. And let's start over here. So let's look at my HTML first. Basic LWC, so you can see this is a template. Similar to before, we're just going to insert the title over at the top. So you see there's the title, LWC list widget. And then we're going to have this for each loop. We're iterating over the list items, which is in the JS. And then we're just going to render each input item right there. So let's go to the meta first. And again, remember, is exposed as true. We've got an API version, what versions we support. We've added this target, not necessary to be all included in this dashboard. We've also got this target config. Yes, it has a step, but it only has this one property title. And then let's go over the JS. So you see how we've used a lot more of the APIs right here. Results from the step, the metadata, information about the columns on the step. We've got the selection, the current selection, or being able to set the selection, the select mode that is configured in the designer right here, get state and set state, where we talked where you can get the whole state of the dashboard or set it as what addition to our title property, which we showed. And all this does, right, we're just going to look at things like, hey, when you click on something, what do we do? And how do we react to that? And then also here, notice that we set the selection, right? When you click on something, we want to set that selection and send that event back to the dashboard. So this one's just about 64 lines of code. And what I get for that is I can click here and I can select anything on this. And then that selection, because it's just sends that back to the step or the query, it can facet other things in the dashboard. You kind of get that for free. So let's go a little bit even more advanced. Let's look at the hierarchy widget. So here is our hierarchy widget. Where do we want to start? Let's start over at the JavaScript. So in the JavaScript, you can see we're using a lot of these things. And what we're doing here, we've got a lot of where anything changes, we kind of want to reload. There's this get items, which has kind of all the logic, basically just takes this flat list of results and it structures them into a hierarchical structure by looking up. We've got a parent ID. So this is good for things like role hierarchy or user hierarchy, where I've always got that parent ID. So each row will have its ID, but then I can use the parent ID to look up who your parent is and do that. So the HTML is super sure. We're just going to say, hey, use a lightning tree and render that lightning tree, and then the JavaScript handles all the other dynamic rendering. So going through this, so let's look at this is a role hierarchy where I've got a role and I can expand that role, I can expand that role, and I could click on a role and then that would select this role and we could facet the whole rest of the dashboard by that role. So we've looked at that and the metadata. So let's look at the metadata. So again, we've got the has step is true. We've got the is exposed is true, a description, name. We've got the analytics dashboard target. Now in this one, we've got 4 properties here. We've got the ID column, which is a dimension, and that's useful because that will give you some guide rails on when you're setting this up and configuring it, what can you actually pick. So including label, description, required. We've got that parent ID column, the label column, as well as the root node, who's the boss in this hierarchy. And I can kind of show you now what does that setup experience look like. So let's click on this one here, this component attribute. You see now, because I have those 4 tags defined, now I've got these 4 pickers. And instead of me having to kind of type in these fields, because this is associated with a step or a query, I can now choose which one of these attributes is the correct one. And I can set up what's the ID column, what's the parent ID column, what's the label column I want to use for the descriptive text here, and then what is the root node. So really flexible in that now I can build this hierarchy once, and whether I want to use it for a role hierarchy or a manager hierarchy, Now, what I've done here, some different things. One is this is a product hierarchy. So this is a different kind of hierarchy in that it is a more dimensional. So I've got two dimensions. We've got a product family and product. And what I ended up doing here, let's select this and go here and actually, let me see if I can edit the query. And what I've done is just gone into SACL and customized the SACL here. So I wanted to return a root node. So say products, that's going to be the root node. And then I did a query for all the product families. So I can get a list of all the product families. And then I did another query of product name, including your product family. So that could be the parent lookup. So I could look up the parent and basically union the root with all the families, with all the products. And this gives me this list, right? So I've got this product right here and accessories. These are families. And then these all point up to products. But then there's also products, and then they point up to their family. So because I could do all that restructuring in SACL, now I can create experiences like this where I can expand each node of the tree and see all of these product families. So, it's just a way to kind of take something that was built, this component was built for these types of hierarchies, these self-join or self-referential hierarchies, and use it for a dimensional, multi-dimensional hierarchy. I also did something fun here. I kind of created this Salesforce hierarchy right here where I can expand and collapse. And how did I do that? I can even show you the details. This is fun because you can look at the table. But where does that table come from? So let's edit this. And actually, there's a static step in here. We can edit our static step. So I just use the static step UI like a spreadsheet here, where I can kind of create my hierarchy, and that way, if you've got a hierarchy that's changing often, you can just kind of hard code it in here, and you can change anything you need as you go, right on the fly. Or if you didn't want to, let's say, upload a spreadsheet or a CSV or pull the data from somewhere. So lots of flexibility with how you use that. Keep in mind when you're building this, if you've got the pilot enabled, you just drag a component onto the screen, just drag it on there, and then you hit that configure button. With the pilot enabled, you'll see this Lightning Components tab right here. And remember that is exposed flag. This will show you all of the is exposed. And I can just select my component and just add that into the dashboard. And then you'll have that ability to kind of connect it to data, to connect it to queries. It'll set up a starter query. You may need to kind of edit the query to kind of get it in the correct shape that you need. Sometimes you see that there's a little bug with the attributes. You just need to select away, select again. So as for timing, you don't think legally I can kind of make any hard commitments of safe harbor, of course, but this is something we're hoping to get GA fairly soon. If you want to play with this, we are happy to turn this on at any dev or sandbox org. Reach out to me. That's emengel, EMENGEL at salesforce.com. We are happy to turn that on. We want people to kick the tires. We want you to build things. We want you to share what you've built with us. Maybe we can highlight some of those things at Dreamforce. Yeah, we love feedback. Start digging into this. Tell us what it does, what it doesn't do, what you want to build with it, and we would absolutely love to see what you build with it. So thank you very much for listening. I hope you're as excited about this as I am, and that's all I got.